Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and we all like vampire stories. They are very scary, and who's the most famous vampire of all time? Of course, Count Dracula. But did you know that Dracula himself was based on a real historical character? And of course we're talking about Vlad the Third, also known as Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad, Dracula, what have you. But who was this man? What do we know about his history, and how did he become the inspiration for the most famous vampire of all time? Born in 1428, Vlad the Third, commonly known as Vlad the Impaler, is the historical character upon which the fictional vampire Dracula is based on. While on one hand, Dracula, the famous novel published by Bram Stoker in 1897, has undoubtedly immortalized the person of Vlad III, Dracula of Wallachia, it has simultaneously shrouded his figure in a series of fictional characteristics now so deeply rooted in the collective imagination that it's extremely difficult to discern between the dark novelistic character and the historical one. Now, the name Vlad should be understood as a contraction of Vladislav, which in Slavic languages means professor of glory. Pretty nice. And in orthographed documents written in Latin, Vlad would refer to himself as Ladislaus. The word Dracula, Drakulya, Drakulya are all different forms of what is a patronymic. A patronymic is a name derived from the name of a father or ancestor, typically by the addition of a prefix or suffix. Examples would be Johnson or Anderson. This patronymic often appears in Vlad the Third's autograph texts in the form Drakulya. All of these forms should be considered correct, and in fact the proliferation of different spellings would have to be connected with the low literacy of the people, leading to the coexistence of different spelling whenever the word was reproduced in written form. Drakulya literally means son of the dragon, because Vlad III's father, Vlad II of Wallachia, was also known as Vlad Dracul, Vlad the Dragon, as he had been appointed a Knight of the Order of the Dragon by Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary and Holy Roman Emperor, in 1431. It is also worth of note, and really interesting, the fact that even Vlad II sometimes is indicated in some documents simply as Drakulya or Dracula. But in that case, it's not a matter of a patronym, it wasn't like the granddad's name, but it should be indicated or translated as a reference to his membership to the Order of the Dragon. So Dracula, when talking about Vlad II, means Vlad of the Dragon. For further context, the Order of the Dragon, which was created, as we said, by Sigismund himself, had the purpose of opposing the hegemony of the Ottoman Turks, and at the same time fostering loyalty among Hungarian and Wallachian nobility by gathering them into one single brotherhood. From this moment on, the house of Vlad II's descendants will be known as Draculesti. Now, in Romanian, one of the languages spoken in Wallachia, the word Dracul would progressively acquire negative connotations until it becomes another way to say devil. While the word Balaur, originally the name of a specific dragon from Romanian mythology, or Zmeu, a word of Slavic origin, progressively became established to indicate the dragon proper. Alright, but how do we know all of this? Well, if the word Dracul during the reign of Vlad II was just a nickname with no negative connotation, already by the time of Vlad III, things would change. So much so that Nicolae Madrusa, the Pope's envoy to Hungary in 1470, referring to Vlad III, wrote, "The tyrant Dracul, a name they, the Romanians, use for the devil." The progressive disappearance of the term Dracul in Romanian to represent or designate the fantastical beast, and instead its focus to a demon or a devil, probably has to do or should be connected with Vlad III's authoritarian rule and to the instrumental usage by his detractors and political opponents, specifically his rival in the Wallachian throne, Dan III, who on at least 2 occasions accused Vlad III of being guided by the devil, or directly accusing him of being a demon. The historical figure of Vlad III is what would be considered a voivode. This is a noble title of Slavic origin whose literal meaning is war leader of the region of Wallachia. Now, Wallachia is a region of present-day Romania whose name broadly means land of the Romans or land of foreigners. The name of Wallachia derives from the Germanic word Valhas, which originally indicated the Celtic population of the Volsi. Despite its name, Wallachia emerges as a political entity during the Middle Ages, forming from a veritable melting pot of different people. And if the characteristic linguistic element remains Neo-Latin, its social fabric will also be constituted by Slavic, Bulgarian and Cuman elements. Now, on this video we talked a lot about war and battles and of course professional warriors like knights and men-at-arms, and one of the things about people that did this for a job is that they got a lot of time to train. But in our day and age with our busy lives, sometimes it's difficult to make sure that you have enough time to train and organize your routine and training sessions well, which is why I would like to take a moment now to mention the kind sponsor that made this video possible, Trainwell. Trainwell is a personalized fitness app that was ranked highest out of the best personal trainer apps of 2023 by Forbes. And when it comes to my personal experience, it's the only app that can get me to actually train consistently. I think one of the best aspects of Trainwell is the fact that you get a real-life, human, dedicated personal trainer that you get to have an onboarding call with that can help you schedule and organize and just do a training routine specifically designed for you. My personal trainer's name is Terence and he was a perfect match. But of course, if it does happen that for whatever reason the trainer that you were assigned, it just doesn't work out, you're free to switch and change into another trainer anytime you want. But one of the great things about the personal online trainer is that they are professionally trained to help you build a good routine based on what sort of equipment you have. So in my case, I've got a few dumbbells around the house and he of course makes use of those within my routine, but they're also trained to create a good routine based on just the t-shirt you've got on you. So you don't need to have equipment, you don't need to have an Apple Watch, they can work with whatever you have. One of the best aspects of having a training app is the fact that you can train from the convenience of your own home, but you can also take it with you to the gym if that's what you want to do. You get to train at whatever time of the day you prefer. So if you want to give it a try, click my Trainwell former co-pilot link in the description and you will get 14 days free trial and you'll have a personal online trainer assigned to you. And massive thanks to Trainwell for sponsoring my video. Previously a vassal of the Kingdom of Hungary, Wallachia became independent in the late Middle Ages under the leadership of a voivode, so a war leader with a Cuman name, Basarab, and progressively gained importance, becoming a frontier land with respect to the growing expansion of the Ottoman Empire. Vlad III's father, Vlad II, was the illegitimate son of the previous voivode or war leader of Wallachia, Mircea the Elder, and openly contested for the Wallachian throne with his brothers and cousins, the latter belonging to the dynasty house. Throughout the 15th century there was a constant succession of different nobles on the Wallachian throne, alternatively supported by either the Holy Roman Emperor or the Ottoman Sultan, obviously with the intention of bringing the region into either the imperial or the Ottoman orbit. Vlad II, so Dracula's father, was recognized as the legitimate voivode or warlord in 1431 by Emperor Sigismund, following his oath and investiture in the Order of the Dragon, and by 1436 he was firmly in control of the region. After Sigismund's death, sensing a loosening of imperial protection and due to growing hostility with his neighbor Janos Huniadi, who was a very powerful man, he was the voivode or warlord of Transylvania, regent of Hungary, and he was also a knight of the Order of the Dragon, Vlad II undertook a fluctuating policy, secretly agreeing with Sultan Murad II. Huniadi was then imprisoned by Murad himself due to his less than transparent conduct, which evidently sought to avoid openly clashing with both Christians and Muslim powers, following the victorious campaign of Huniadi, who had in the meantime extended his control over Wallachia. Vlad II was not only freed, but returned home at the head of a Turkish army, regaining power. To ensure the wavering loyalty of the Wallachian voivode, the Sultan took two of his sons, Vlad III, so Dracula, and Radu, as hostages. So now, Vlad II, thanks to the help of the Ottoman Turks, is in power in Wallachia, but unfortunately, Huniadi, in 1447, organizes an offensive against Vlad II, manages to defeat him, and kill him. And he did that because he had the support of Wallachian nobles. Both Dracula's father and Mircea were killed. Now, in all of this, the Ottoman Sultan Murad II is really irritated, and therefore he decides to declare war on Huniadi, and at the same time announces Vladimir III, so Dracula, as the legitimate ruler of Wallachia. And mind you, Dracula was still a hostage in his palace at this time. A year passes, we are now in 1448, and the Ottoman Sultan manages to successfully move his troops, engage with Hunyadi in Kosovo and defeats him. So Vladimir III decides, hey, this is my opportunity to regain the throne, and he declares himself legitimate heir and gains control of the Wallachian throne. But this is short-lived, as in the same year, Hunyadi manages to drive him out once again. This is where the situation becomes really complicated and quite intricate, because Vlad III thinks that he can get some refuge with the Ottomans, but they refuse this time. They're not supporting him anymore, so he leaves. First he goes to Moldavia, then he goes to Transylvania, and he starts garnering support. In his mind now, there is only vengeance against the Turks who betrayed him. Welcome to 15th century Eastern European politics. Now let's pause for a moment and imagine how sour this man, Dracula, would have been at this time in his life. His father got killed by his rival in Wallachia. At the same time, the Turks are not supporting him, so he wants them all dead. And to make matters even more complicated, in 1453 we've got the conquest of Constantinople at the arms of Mehmed II, which shifts completely the axis of power in the Balkans in favor of the same Ottoman world that Dracula wants dead. In the midst of all of this chaos, get ready for a plot twist. Do you remember Hunyadi? Yeah, the guy that killed the father, and yeah, that guy. Hunyadi is now in trouble because the Ottomans are gaining more and more power, and he never had, he was at war with them. But at the same time, he now doesn't have the support. There is a drift between him and the Kingdom of Hungary. So, Hungarians are a problem. Ottomans are a problem. What do? Of course, you call Vlad III, the son of the guy you murdered, and promise him the throne of Wallachia. Of course. Now, the thing is that Hunyadi had given power to a sort of a puppet representative in the Wallachian throne, which came from the Daniesti family. So what do you do with him now, if you promise the throne to Vlad III? Well, while they were trying to figure this one out, a battle happens. The Battle of Belgrade, where Hungarian troops face the Ottoman Turks in battle and destroy them. And in all of this, Vlad III has an actual duel to death, not joking, against the previous Wallachian leader, the Danesti guy, and kills him, effectively regaining his father's throne. They should make a movie out of this. Never mind the vampire. So Vlad III is finally the ruler of the Kingdom of Wallachia, which initially isn't of that great importance. So in order to consolidate power, he renews his allegiance with the Hungarians, while at the same time weaving a fruitful alliance with Stephen the Great, voivode of Moldavia. Now, remember, he still wants the Ottoman Turks dead, but he's a strategist and a pragmatist, which means that at first he decides to renew his father's policy with the Turks, which meant that he begins to, once again, pay tribute on an annually basis. At the same time, he's also not opposing Turkish forces that, for their offensive against the Hungarians, necessarily had to transit through Wallachia. He knows he can't stop them, so he doesn't even try. Now, since we mentioned Vlad's dad, Vlad II, remember that he was betrayed by the local nobles, and Vlad III, Dracula, hasn't forgotten about that, which leads to the famous historical event called Blood Easter at Targoviste. According to the chronicle, which we believe to be true, maybe a little enriched, perhaps it didn't actually happen during Easter, but anyways, Vlad III chooses a day and invites 200 nobles that he had ascertained were the same people that were disloyal to his father. With an excuse, they come to his court and he has them all arrested. Some he gets impaled right away. Yeah, we start with the impalement. Others he reduced to chains. And in 1459 he has these nobles that betrayed his dad to force labor in order to build his castle, the Poenari fortress, which will become a symbol of his power. Yes, Dracula's castle is a real thing, and that's how it was built. This is the first historically documented case in Europe where a large group of high dignitaries were reduced to chains and forced to build a castle. This is in fact where the nickname the Impaler originates from. In fact, impalement appeared to be Vlad III's favorite method of execution, and not only did he use it against these nobles, but he also used it against all sorts of members of the merchant class. Anyone who dared oppose him would be impaled. It is, however, worth emphasizing that some elements relating to Vlad the Third cruelty come from chronicles written by his opponents and detractors, leaving a veil of doubt on their authenticity. We shouldn't just believe anything political opponents say of their rivals. It is, however, true that his propensity for impalement is transmitted by chronicles from both the Christian and Muslim worlds, suggesting that the references to it, although perhaps enriched and exasperated, are substantially true. If, at the beginning of his reign, Vlad III maintained a hazy policy without openly clashing with the Turks, it is evident that he was planning to tie himself more closely to the Christian West, and this is evident from his agreement with Matthias Corvinus, king of Hungary, and the sons of Hunyadi, whose cousin he married. Okay, now we get to the part where we talk about the way he took revenge against the Ottoman Turks, but Christian and Muslim sources disagree when it comes to the beginning of the opening of hostilities against the Ottoman Turks. While several Western chronicles report that the voivode of Wallachia refused to pay tribute to the Sultan as early as 1459, Islamic sources report that Vlad openly revolted against the Sultan only in 1462. In any case, to a peremptory summon from the Sultan to go to Constantinople to account for his conduct and his negotiations with Matthias Corvinus, Vlad III reacted by having the Ottoman messengers eliminated. According to some rumors, probably well-founded, once they crossed the Danube, they had orders to take him prisoner, as had happened to his father before him. But Vlad III saw them coming a mile away. And eventually Vlad III will indeed cross the Danube, but at the head of his troops, and launching a terrible offensive that devastated Bulgaria, then an Ottoman province, far and wide. At the end of the campaign, Vlad sent Matthias Corvinus 2 sacks full of ears, noses, and severed heads, accompanied by a letter. I have killed peasants, women, old and young, who lived in Oblusitsa and Novoselo, where the Danube flows into the sea, up to Rahova, which is near Chilia, from the lower Danube to places like Samovit and Gigem. We have killed 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians, not counting those who were burnt alive in their homes, or those whose heads were cut off by our officers. Thus, Your Highness, it must be known that I have broken the peace with him. We will finish together what we started together, and we will benefit from this situation, since, if Almighty God hears the prayers and orations of Christianity, if he welcomes the supplications of his pious servants, he will grant us victory over the infidels, enemies of the cross. Isn't it fascinating that a historical character whom was the basis for the creation of Dracula the vampire, who hates crosses, actually calls his enemies enemies of the cross? I found it fascinating. It is evident that at this time Vlad was pushing to secure support from the Hungarian crown, aware that his forces could hardly resist alone against those of the Sultan, regardless of his recent victories. Mehmed II's reaction was immediate, and after gathering an imposing army, he personally moved against Wallachia. Historical sources disagree regarding the size of the Turkish army, but it must have undoubtedly been impressive. The Greek historian Laonikos Halkonkodiles, contemporary to the events, speaks of the Titanic army, second only to the one that had taken Constantinople, while the Turkish historian Tursun Bey, also contemporary, speaks of 300,000 men, probably to be understood as including non-combatant personnel as well. With that being said, the figures reported by Venetian chroniclers are actually more cautious. They speak of a force of 60,000 regular soldiers and 30,000 recruited among the Sultan's Balkan subjects. Despite the alliance relationship and the marital bond, Matthias Corvinus did not send any military aid to Vlad, who, to counter the Ottoman troops, found himself issuing a general levy mobilizing the entire population, including gypsy communities peripheral to the Wallachian world and often in a semi-servile state. Sources disagree on the size of the Wallachian army, but it is commonly believed that they could not count on more than 30,000 men to oppose the Turks. The Ottoman advance in Wallachian land proved incredibly difficult right from the crossing of the Danube, and the guerrilla and scorched earth tactics employed by Vlad exacted a considerable blood toll on the Sultan's troops. Again, the Greek Laonikos reports the use of infiltrating bubonic plague patients into the Turks' camp with the intent of infecting the enemies, and that before a massive Wallachian ambush remembered as the night attack at Targoviste. Vlad himself infiltrated the Turkish camp, strong in his perfect knowledge of customs and language, so as to gather all the necessary information, we are told. Because remember, Vlad III was a hostage with the Sultan since he was a kid, so he spoke the language probably without any accent and very, very fluently. Where have I heard of that again? Someone who was a hostage and then they rebelled. Don't you dare to say the word Teutoburg in front of me. No, no. The night attack near the Wallachian capital while wreaking havoc in the Ottoman camp was not decisive, and Vlad and his forces went into hiding, leaving the field open to the Turks who entered Tarkoviste in the last days of June 1462. Approaching the Wallachian capital, however, Mehmed II's forces were greeted by a chilling scene, also reported by a Greek chronicler. We read, "The Sultan's army entered into the area of the Impalements, which was 17 stades long and 7 stades wide, about 3 square kilometers. There were large stakes there on which, as it was said, about 20,000 men, women and children had been spitted. The Turks were dumbfounded when they saw the multitude of men on the stakes. There were infants too, affixed to their mothers on the stakes, and birds had made their nests in their entrails." Now these were the corpses of political dissidents and their families which Vlad III, Dracula, had left there for people to see as a warning. Initially to scare his own population, but in this case, the invaders. The campaign in Wallachia, in any case, had proven exceedingly costly in terms of men and money for the Sultan, and he decided to withdraw with the bulk of his army, perhaps also intimidated by Vlad's ability and ferocity. Mehmed II, nevertheless, celebrated a formal triumph over the Wallachians, and left in Wallachian land a contingent of janissaries and knights led by none other than Radu, Vlad's younger brother, who had been handed over with him as a hostage at the tender age of Muhammad II court, appointing him voivode. Radu, faithful to the Sultan, fought several pitched battles against his brother Vlad, but he was always defeated, and due to Vlad's centralizing policy and cruelty, the Wallachian nobles defected one against the other, leaving him with increasingly meager forces, mostly made up of mercenaries. Having fled to Hungary in desperate search of Matthias Corvinus' support, Vlad was instead captured and imprisoned, as the Hungarian monarch had no desire to directly enter into conflict with the Ottoman Empire. To justify his turnabouts in the eyes of Christianity, Corvinus fabricated false evidence against Vlad, which he circulated among the powers of the West. Letters attributed to Vlad himself, in which he declared himself, allegedly, ready to switch back to the Turkish side and abandon the Christian faith if the Sultan would restore him to Radu's throne. Of course, these were false. Vlad III remained a prisoner in Hungary for 14 years, before being freed by Corvinus to employ him in the internal struggles that were again inflaming Wallachia with the intent of wresting it from Ottoman influence. Ascending to the Wallachian throne for the third time, Vlad met his death on the battlefield in 1477, deprived of Hungarian military support, fighting against Ottoman forces that supported yet another pretender to the Wallachian throne, Basarab Laiota of the dynasty house. Even before Bram Stoker's Vampire, Vlad III became a literary figure with incredibly negative characteristics, and this even before his death during his imprisonment in Hungary. The first to promote the figure of Vlad III as that of a tyrannical and cruel monarch was precisely the man who had betrayed him, the King of Hungary, Matthias Corvinus. In 1463, Corvinus circulated at the court of Emperor Frederick III the pamphlet History of Voivode Dracula, which subsequently was enriched with details becoming the theatrical work Story of the Madman called Dracula of Wallachia. Corvinus' aim is evidently to cast as much discredit as possible on Vlad's figure, so as to justify his own choices during the conflict with the Turks. The tales sprouted from Corvinus' pamphlet and the theatrical piece in German, converged into and benefited from a tradition that was being created among the Saxons of Transylvania, a population also of German mother tongue that during the reign of Vlad III had suffered strong relationships from the voivode, the support offered to his adversary Dan III of Dynasty. This is the tradition that links the purge of the rebellious nobles to an Easter celebration, thus mixing the sacred with the profane, which depicts Vlad III feasting among the impaled bodies and even dipping bread in the blood dipping from the corpses, suggesting the element of vampirism for the first time that will then be developed by Bram Stoker. Vlad the III would end up becoming representative of tyranny and impiety, and his face would be used in sacred art on the second half of the 15th century to represent the great villains of history, such as Pontius Pilate or Aegeas, the Roman proconsul who, according to tradition, ordered the crucifixion of Saint Andrew. While these historical elements led to the construction of a figure with demonic traits, aggravated by the negative interpretation of the nickname Drakulya, which inspired Bram Stoker, and which the Irish writer himself contributed to further demonize, from an impartial analysis of the sources, the character that emerges, restored to his historical dimension, is not particularly more cruel than that of the average warlord of his time. Certainly a controversial figure, who, like most of the petty lords in the Balkan area, tried as much as possible to keep a foot in two shoes, cultivating a fragile balance between the Empire and Hungary on one side and the Ottomans on the other, showing undeniable opportunism and propensity to change sides depending on the moment, but perhaps, given the events of his youth, feeling truly torn and divided between two worlds, the Christian and the Muslim one, finding himself to cross blades with his own brother, with whom he had shared the fate of hostage at the Ottoman court, and then the betrayal suffered by Matthias Corvinus, can only help us put ourselves in his shoes, who was at the end of the day similar to the condottieri of the time. The events relating to his war against the Turks finally trace the profile of an incredibly astute and capable military leader, a ferocious executioner of his enemies and their families, whom, regardless of his absolutely horrible deeds, probably should be remembered not just as the blood-sucking vampire, but as the political leader and historical figure, which, in my opinion, ends up being more interesting than that mantled in the guise of the monster. Valhaz, which originally indicated the Celtic population of the Volsci. However, it progressively extended by Germanic populations to any foreign reality located to the south or west, whether it is actually Celtic or later Roman. Its derivatives will be used by the Anglo-Saxons to define the British Romans and to create the word Welsh, and the word Welsh was used by Flemish to define the French-speaking element. The Norse used the word Wallen to indicate the Kingdom of France or the Roman Empire. German-speaking Swiss used the word Walsche or Welsche to indicate Italian and Latin speakers. More derivatives of this word were also acquired in Slavic languages, which is why this word is used to indicate Romanian speakers, and in Polish, Italians are still called this today. Alright, noble ones, but I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet a member of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Also, don't forget to take advantage of the amazing offer Trainwell has for you and click the link in the description below. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.